We're going to talk a little bit tonight about step 12, and part of that is having a spiritual awakening. And I believe each and every week when we come here to this service, in my world anyway, Guy's music and Mary's music is part of my spiritual awakening. It's part of my spiritual experience, and I certainly appreciate that all the time, guys. So step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. That's a pretty heady step. There's lots of stuff in there. There's different things that we're required to do. So we're going to break it down a little bit and talk about it, and then we're going to review the steps throughout the year that we've talked about. So having had a spiritual awakening, if you read the big book and read Bill W.'s story about that, he had a bright flash of lights while he was laying in the hospital, and he felt that God's presence was with him and in him during that spiritual awakening. And I think when we read that in the big book, many of us think that maybe we haven't had one of those because we haven't had that experience. We haven't had that bright light and that shining light come into our life. But I think if we think about some of the little experiences we've had along the way while we've been in recovery, the people that have been brought into our lives, the events that have happened, the neat things that have happened. We suddenly get a job back and we get things happening. We're making amends, doing our thing. Those are all little spiritual experiences that come together to be a spiritual awakening. And I think if we think about them, we can think of lots that are happening in our life, and it's likely as a result of our Creator, our higher power. The second part is as a result of these steps. And the part that I think is missing out of this step that I like to talk about when we're talking about the steps is not doing the steps, because that doesn't do anything. We need to work the steps. We need to rigorously work the steps. Right? Thank you. And if we do that, and we dig deep, and we work with our sponsors, we work with our mentors, we work with counselors, people in our life to help us understand these steps, we're going to have progress. We're going to be able to move from 1 to 2 to 3, and eventually we're going to have that spiritual awakening, and we're going to be able to give back. But we need to work those steps. Part of that is being rigorously honest. The main part of it is being rigorously honest. Then the next part is we carry this message to alcoholics and addicts. We're responsible, and we are responsible. We talk about the responsibility pledge quite often. We're responsible for whenever the need for the hand of AA, NA, whatever the case may be, is needed. We're responsible to do that. We're responsible to reach out, to share our experience, strength, and hope, and, our experience, strength, and hope, and that part of our life with newcomers coming in. We need to let newcomers know that this is possible, that we can get recovery, that we can quit all of those old ways and old habits, and we can change our life. And then the next part is practice these principles in all our affairs. The principles are the steps that we have worked on, and we've come to understand from working those steps that they will change our lives. They are only a suggested program of recovery, but they will work. And if we work those steps, then certain promises and certain things will come true in our life. They are the principles of the AA program. In the last number of weeks or months, we've talked about spirituality a lot. In October, we talked about entering the world of the Spirit. In November, we talked about spiritual maintenance. When we set out to prepare this message, I had to ask myself what these principles really were. And as I researched it a bit and studied a bit and looked in the big book, I found out that the principles are really just the steps. That's what Bill W. was talking about. In the foreword to the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, he says, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are a set of principles, spiritual in nature, which, if practiced, will expel the obsession to drink. We might refer to these principles or steps as a bunch of laws. We know that they have stood the test of time and are as true today as they were when Bill W. wrote them. He at the time stated they came from a higher power. He said they were created by something beyond man. They are as basic and as unchanging as the law of gravity or the freezing point of water. They just don't change. They are as true today and pertinent today as they were when he wrote them back in 1935, 1936. The 12 steps are designed for living. They are a set of principles or laws that tell us all how we should live. And they work, strangely enough, if we work them. Working these steps and practicing these principles or laws in all our affairs will set us free from many things that used to enslave us and used to make our lives miserable and unmanageable. Make no mistake, we do have self-will, and we can do whatever it is that we want to. Or we can choose to live by these set of principles or rules. If we live by these principles, our lives will change, and the promises will certainly come true in our lives. When we work the steps and practice these principles in all our affairs, our lives are transformed, and we see that every week here. Now we're required to carry this message to others so that they can change their lives and they can experience the promises coming true for them as well. In the scripture I chose this week is Philippians 4, verse 9. It's pretty simple. It was a letter to the Philippians by the Apostle Paul, and he was speaking about spiritual growth. And he said, "Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me, put it into action." Unlike material things which diminish if you give them away, our spirituality grows. And it grows and it grows as we give it away, as we share it with other people around us. The more we give and share, the more we grow in our spiritual life. So let's talk about each of the steps. We're going to review them for the last year, starting in January for the newcomers here. In January we started step 1. Strangely enough, there's 12 steps, 12 months. December we end with step 12, and we're just going to go through and review them and the spiritual principle that goes with each of the steps. So step 1, the spiritual principle, is honesty. And it's such an important and vital thing that we start our recovery journey. We have to admit defeat over our struggles with alcohol or drugs or whatever it might be. It could be food, it could be sex, it could be pornography. Whatever it is, we have to admit that we have a problem. We have to surrender to that problem. We have to admit powerless, and we have to ask for help. When we ask for help and admit that we're powerless, the strangest thing happens. It seems that we get the power to start moving forward in our program. Step 2 is hope. So such an important step that it's helped all of us. We have to come to believe there might be something bigger and greater than us out there in the old universe guiding things, and we have to understand that. And if we can have hope that there is something out there and we can express that hope to other people, we seem to be able to move forward in our program. Step 3 is all about faith. It's a decision step, I would say, to go on with the work that is required to do the rest of the steps. This is only a matter of being willing to believe through the process of working our 12 steps. Our believing eventually turns into faith, and faith that this process will work and we can change our lives. So turning our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand Him takes a lot of faith. That's a step that I think I work every day. I try to work steps 1, 2, and 3 every day, the foundation steps of our program. And if we do that and we keep turning our life and our will over to the care of God, we will make it through this program very easily, and, well, not easily maybe, but we will make it through the program. Step 4, one of the hardest steps there is to do. It takes courage, and that's a spiritual principle. It's all about looking at our deeper inner self. It's looking at the harms we've done to other people, looking at our conduct that we're not real happy with and not real proud of, and likely brings a lot of shame. It's looking at the lies, the dishonesty, and how it's affected our families, our friends, our business associates, and many other people in our lives. We have to take an honest assessment of ourselves, and let me say, it causes and conditions that cause or contribute to our addiction is really scary. It's one of the scariest and one of the hardest steps there is to do. But if we do it, and we do it with rigorous honesty, and we take our time and we work through it, I'll guarantee you that, along with step 5, will start your healing process. It'll start relieving you of all of the guilt and the shame and the stuff that goes on down here that causes us to want to go back out every now and again. Because killing the pain down here, we know how to do that very easily. And we don't want to do that anymore. We want to learn how to sit in those feelings and how to kill it without using drugs or alcohol. Very, very tough step. Step 5 is one of integrity, is the principle. And after doing a thorough examination of yourself in step 4, you're required to share all of that stuff from step 4 with a trusted person and God and yourself. To do that step is also very difficult, and it's a step that often people are not brave enough to go ahead with. They don't do it. They just stop there. They'll stop at maybe step 3, or they'll do a little bit of step 4 and they hurt too much and they don't move forward. It takes courage and it takes integrity to keep moving forward and doing it. Again, I will guarantee you, if you have the courage and the strength to do it, your life will change. Those 2 steps will change your life for sure. Step 6 is willingness. Now that we have a list of our defects of character or our shortcomings, we can ask God to help remove those. And I believe we also need to have positive character traits as well, because you know what? Even as bad as we were in our addiction, we had a lot of defects of character, a lot of bad traits. We had a lot of good ones too. And we need to recognize those to help us feel just a little bit better about ourselves. And the negative traits we want to replace with positive traits. There's a bit of a vacuum there if we don't do that. Step 7 is humility. This step calls for actions. In step 5 and 6, we determined what our shortcomings were. We identified them, that we were selfish and self-centered a lot of the time. We need to practice being humble by realizing that we aren't anymore the center of the universe. We recognize that there is a God, there is a higher power, and it's not us. It's not me and it's not you. There is something else bigger and greater than us out there. Hopefully we're far enough along to recognize that we are part of the whole, and to make mistakes is human. We must be humble enough to ask for help in forgiving ourselves. And again, that's part of our spiritual growth, when we can ask our higher power and our Creator for the help in doing any of these things. Step 8 is called brotherly love. That's the spiritual connection there. While making a list of those to whom we owe amends, it's time to enact the golden rule. It's important to treat others as we wish to be treated. We must also learn not to judge others, but accept them for who they are, not our vision of who they should be. Step 9 is discipline. As we continue, we're removing the barriers that can block forward, sober growth. We're preparing to sweep our side of the street clean. We're becoming accountable for making amends to those that we've harmed. We practice new behaviors by facing our wrongs. To do this, we must have self-discipline. We try to correct our wrongs through actions as well as words, making living amends as well as direct amends. While doing this step, we stay close, and I have to emphasize this, we stay close with our sponsor, and we get guidance from our sponsor on who and how we should do our amends. The amends process as well is not easy, and I usually recommend that we pick the low-hanging fruit first, and the more difficult ones we practice with our sponsor, and we wait until the time is right. Doing amends is cleaning your side of the street. Okay? Step 10 is perseverance. We have entered the world of the Spirit. We talked about that back in October. We strive to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This takes practice. It means we have to keep working at it. We are at the beginning of the road to a happy destiny, and it takes diligence and perseverance. And really what step 10 is working these steps each and every day. It's looking to see if we owe an amends to anybody, and it's making that amends very quickly. Were we dishonest? Were we unfair to somebody? We need to correct that immediately. Step 11 is spiritual awareness. And this one suggests we continue to become aware of our higher power. We start to become aware of His presence in all aspects of our lives. We start to see and recognize His handiwork in our lives. Those things we once thought were coincidences are now understood to be His work and His work in our life. We express gratitude for all He does. As we grow in our spirituality, so does the awareness of our higher power and all He does for us and our families and the people around us. Step 12 is service. As a result of working all of these steps, and I emphasize as I did before, working them, taking each one diligently and meaningfully, understanding them and doing the necessary work to allow you to move to the next step. Once we've done this, or during the process, we will have felt a growth in our spiritual being, sometimes called a spiritual awakening. In order to keep this moving along and to grow spiritually, we are called upon to give it away. Strange concept, true, we talked about it a bit more. Spirituality grows in abundance the more we give it away. Remember what our scripture says, whatever you have learned, give it away. There's another scripture, Isaiah 61, verses 1 to 3. In this scripture, and this one's commonly called Jesus' mission statement, he was sent to preach the gospel or the good news. It's implied that that is exactly what is required of us. Not so much to preach, but possibly be an evangelist for recovery, sharing your experience, strength, and hope. Sharing with the newcomer, reaching out, and always making sure the hand of AA, CA, NA, CMA, SA, I hope I haven't missed any, but any of the other 12-step programs is always there and available to the newcomer. We want to make sure that we're there to help the newcomer or somebody coming back that needs the hand of our program. Basically sharing what you've learned from working your program, what you've learned in meetings and from your sponsor and from your mentors in your life that has helped you become successful in recovery. Give that away. Share it with everyone and especially the newcomer. Give them a sense of hope. So how do we do that? We do it by taking part in our meetings, doing service work in the program and out of the program, by setting a good example, being that person that people look up to and the person that they may want to be like. Once you're ready, once you have worked your steps a few times, you feel confident enough, take on a sponsee. Take part in mission work. Take part in your church. Take part in reaching out to the less fortunate. Help the agencies that provided service to the homeless, to the underprivileged, and to the mentally disabled. Carry the message into hospitals, prisons, and into other institutions. And you know what? I know, and I'm not going to ask anybody to put their hand up, but I know many of you lived on the streets at one time or another before you got into recovery. And there was organizations and institutions and agencies that helped you out. And I would suggest it's time to give back, to pay it forward, to go back to those places and say, what can I do for you now that you helped me out so much before? And that's a great way to give back. The more we give it away, the more we receive, and the stronger our spiritual selves become, the stronger is our recovery. Those are the principles that we live by. If we're diligent and we work these principles into our lives and live them every day, we will enjoy all the promises and all the good that is promised to us. I challenge each of you to consciously apply these principles in all you do every day. Be a shining example to those around you. Give everyone a sense of hope.